There has been a lot of speculation over the past year or so. Why isn't Khamzat Chimaev being more active in the UFC? He's had 2 fights since he fought Gilbert Burns back in April of 2022. Well, recently it's kind of been reignited because there was discussion of Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev at UFC 300 in Las Vegas. And it reignited discussion that Khamzat Chimaev, the rumor that Khamzat Chimaev is unable to enter the United States and that he's unable to obtain a work visa due to his connections with Ramzan Kadyrov, who is a Chechen warlord. And basically, this has been speculated on for over a year now. And I'm going to show you a clip that I dug up from roughly a year ago of Dana White being asked point blank about this topic. And his response was kind of jarring. And we're also going to take a look at an interview Khamzat Chimaev did a day ago, where some of his answers, he talks about UFC 300 and where he might fight next. Some of his answers kind of lead credence to the fact, oh yeah, most likely he's not allowed in the United States. But I want to be very clear because there was an article from a website called Sports Politica, which is considered a reliable source. I believe the guy that wrote the article also works for Bloody Elbow. Basically saying that Khamzat Chimaev is not allowed in the United States. The title of the article is How a UFC Star Was Banned from Entering the United States, which I think is completely disingenuous. Because you read the article, and believe me, I read it once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times. It's not a very long article. I read it multiple times, and I'm scouring this article for evidence. Where is the evidence that Khamzat Chimaev cannot enter the United States? Where is the confirmation that Khamzat Chimaev cannot enter the United States? Because I believe that there's a really good chance that is a likely scenario. It's been speculated on for over a year, but we haven't really had clear-cut evidence. We've had little breadcrumbs here and there. His connection to Ramzan Kadyrov may honestly ruin his UFC career. And honestly, another thing we're going to discuss in this video is something that has really never been talked about in the MMA community. How there was another UFC fighter in Khamzat Chimaev's position before, and guess what? Now he's dead. So Khamzat Chimaev may not only ruin his UFC career with his affiliation with Ramzan Kadyrov, he may end up losing his life. But I'm scouring this article, and basically the only information this article has is quotes from an interview with the Khamzat Chimaev BJJ coach from 4 months ago saying, you know, there's issues with sanctions and there's travel issues for Russian fighters right now. But it doesn't really officially confirm that Khamzat Chimaev is not allowed in the United States. It doesn't confirm it at all. And then what you have is, you have follow the leader in MMA media, where somebody reports something and then everybody else runs with it, but they kind of give themselves an out by saying, as reported by blank. We've seen this a lot, not as much anymore because everyone realizes he's the total grifter, but we've seen it a lot with kind of Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen will report something on his YouTube channel or he'll say something somewhere. Then all the MMA media websites kind of trot it out for clicks, and then they kind of absolve themselves of any actual due diligence by saying, as reported by Chael Sonnen. And that's exactly what happened with this article. There's people reporting, confirmed Khamzat Chimaev no longer allowed in the United States. And while that's very likely, and you know, the interview I'm going to show you from Dana White from 10 months ago that got literally no traction, you know, leads me to believe even more. And the interview from Khamzat Chimaev leads me to believe even more. And we're going to look at those clips. It's still not confirmed. There is no new information in this article, which I will link down below. You can go read it for yourself and tell me if I'm missing something. The only information is his BJJ coach, some quotes of him talking about basically Russian fighters were having issues traveling. And that's kind of taken from an MMA fighting article, which I'll also link down below. And I'll put an excerpt up on the screen if you want to read it. Just talking about Russian fighters having trouble traveling. It really doesn't 100% confirm that Khamzat Chimaev is not allowed in the United States. But, you know, it seems like that's most likely the case. But again, I just hate that people are reporting this with literal no new facts. It drives me up a wall. So I wanted to make that very clear in this video because this is something that's been speculated about basically for like a year and a half. Since his Kevin Holland fight, this kind of narrative has been speculated about, that Khamzat Chimaev is unable to travel to the United States because of his affiliation with Ramzan Kadyrov, who, honestly, and this is the topic that nobody ever discusses, there was a UFC fighter. His name was Abdul Karim Idilov, who was kind of in the same position as Khamzat Chimaev. He was buddy-buddy with Ramzan Kadyrov. He was training with his kids, and he even made his UFC debut in 2017. Looked really good, great striking, great grappling, got a TKO finish, and he never fought again. He never fought again, and he died under suspicious circumstances. And it was rumored that there was kind of some trouble between Kadyrov's kids or nephew and this UFC fighter, who was kind of brought in eventually as like a political sycophant for Kadyrov. But he was in that same exact situation as Khamzat Chimaev, and then this guy just got killed off. I will link an article for that down in the description as well. It's never talked about. And I understand that, there's a lot of people who criticize, certain fighters for hanging out with, whether it be Vladimir Putin or Ramzan Kadyrov. And I understand that 100%, especially when you have the likes of like Justin Gaethje, Kamaru Usman, willingly going over there and kind of hanging out with them and going to birthday parties. I understand the criticism, okay? But I almost feel bad for guys like Khamzat Chimaev because they basically have two options. They can be a sycophant for that leader. They can push that leader's propaganda. And essentially that's what Khamzat Chimaev is for Ramzan Kadyrov. Or most likely their families can end up dead. They can end up tortured. They can end up killed themselves. Obviously we have a history of that with Abdul Karim, the UFC fighter, who never fought again after his super impressive UFC debut. So it's kind of a weird situation for a guy like Khamzat Chimaev, where if he doesn't kind of hang out and be butt buddies with Ramzan Kadyrov, next thing you know, he's getting killed. Which, honestly, it would not shock me if Khamzat Chimaev's career is ruined. It would not shock me if he ends up dead one day under suspicious circumstances, which I hope doesn't happen, but it may very well happen. But I believe what kind of led to this article revolving around Khamzat Chimaev basically confirming, quote unquote, confirming his inability to travel to the United States, I believe it had to do with UFC 300. Because UFC 300, Dana White was scrambling to make the main event. He wanted Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev. We're going to see what Khamzat Chimaev has to say about that later in this video. And then it didn't happen. They settled with Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill. And essentially, if you read between the lines, most people thought, oh, okay, well, it's probably because Khamzat couldn't enter the United States, so they had to pivot away from that. And maybe, and I did a video on Dana White being on the Nelk Boys podcast, where he said, yeah, we could make a documentary about this, and I'm on the phone, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that. It could be that the UFC, Dana White, their lawyers, are struggling hard, kind of trying to cut through red tape to get Khamzat Chimaev a work visa so he can enter the United States and fight in the UFC in Las Vegas. If Khamzat can never enter the United States again, that's a massive issue, because then essentially you have to try to have him fight on an Abu Dhabi card, which they have an Abu Dhabi card once a year. I'm assuming that he can still travel to the UK because he's been in the UK a couple times, but I don't remember the exact timing of that. So the UFC would have a bunch of trouble kind of getting Khamzat to fight if he cannot come to the United States, where they have the majority of their cards. So I think what kind of sprung this article was the fact that Khamzat Chimaev may be the headliner for UFC 300. Now, if you don't understand, and I'm not going to go too deep into a dive of geopolitical kind of policies, but if you don't understand why, essentially you have Russia-Ukraine war, you have Chechnya, the head of Chechnya, and Ramzan Kadyrov, who's involved in that war, who's also accused of, human rights atrocities and torture and killing and all that stuff. And essentially you have a guy like Khamzat Chimaev hanging out with him, his right-hand man. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get my point. He's pushing his propaganda. He's hanging out with him. He's hanging out with his children. He's training with them. And also, he's helping promote kind of that other MMA organization that he has that's also helping funnel money to him. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that the United States says, oh, you're kind of hanging out with this warlord. You're a close associate with him. You're no longer going to be allowed to enter the United States. And again, this has been rumored for a while. It is not officially confirmed. I've provided you basically all the evidence that has been put out there in articles. But what hasn't been put out there, and what hasn't gotten a lot of traction, and I wanted to make a video about it back then, but there just wasn't enough info at this point in time, was Dana White did an interview with Aaron Bronstetter from TSN at the time. I believe he's with another company now. And Aaron Bronstetter asked, look, why are we waiting for Khamzat to fight in Abu Dhabi? And at this point in time, it was early in 2023. He was talking about October, UFC 294. Is he going to fight before then? Why is he not able to enter the United States? And what you're going to see in this clip is Dana kind of dances around the topic, and then Aaron Bronstetter actually follows up and asks him point blank. And then Dana White kind of gives a very telling answer, in my opinion. Let's take a look at that clip, and then we'll come back and discuss it.
With Khamzat, is there anything precluding him from fighting in the U.S.? Because we keep hearing about him fighting in October, which is a pretty long wait from his last fight to his next fight.
Yeah. That's on him, though. He's got stuff going on in his personal life. That's not because, we're not getting him a fight. Obviously, you know how it goes here. I talk about this all the time. We have to get guys 3 fights a year. So if we don't get guys 3 fights a year, we have to pay them. So the only way that wouldn't happen is if they have personal stuff going on.
Can he fight on U.S. soil right now?
Sure.
Okay, so there's no issues there in terms of hurdles.
No.
So there you hear Aaron Bronsteter press Dana White a little bit, just a little bit. Shout out to him. I'll link that full interview down in the description. But this is from like 10, 11 months ago, where he asked him, what's going on with Chimaev? Is he not able to fight in the United States? And Dana White kind of dances around the answer. And he says, we have to offer these guys 3 fights a year, which is true, but not really true, because essentially if they don't offer him 3 fights a year, there's no real legal ramifications, because you would tie up your entire career in litigation trying to sue the UFC. All this information came out in the antitrust lawsuit. We're not going to get into that in this video. But then Aaron Bronsteter does a great job of following up. Dana White kind of dances around it, and Bronsteter says, can he fight on U.S. soil? And Dana White says, sure. Imagine if you're getting ready to go into surgery, and you looked at your surgeon, you say, am I going to survive this surgery? Are you confident that I'm going to survive this surgery? And he says, sure. I mean, talk about a non-answer. So again, the evasive original answer, and then the sure, and the fact that he's saying, oh, well, that's personal issues going on with him in his personal life. Those personal issues, maybe Dana's thinking, well, I'm not technically lying here. Not that he cares. Maybe I'm not technically lying, but those personal issues are the inability to obtain a work visa. It makes no sense to me that you have Khamzat Chimaev, a budding star, who's constantly online begging for fights, and you're not getting him fights. There's no way. So if the travel restrictions are not true, which I do believe they are true, if they're not true, then the UFC is ruining Khamzat Chimaev's career. Is he looking for a new contract? I thought there was rumors or kind of reporting that he signed a new contract not that long ago. So if this is true, if he's allowed to fight in the United States and the UFC is letting him sit out all year long, but once a year where he fights in Abu Dhabi, they are single-handedly crippling his career. I don't believe that to be fact, because Khamzat Chimaev can be a massive star for the UFC. If they get him in a title fight, that title fight will do huge pay-per-view numbers. And if Khamzat Chimaev wins, I think there's a really good possibility Khamzat Chimaev will be a massive star for the UFC. So it just makes no sense. Everyone's always talking about the UFC cares about money. There's no way they're just willingly sidelining Khamzat Chimaev, all because, what reason? What would be the motive behind it? There's not a motive. So unless Khamzat Chimaev's calling everyone out and not willing to fight, it just makes absolutely no sense. So that leads me to believe that Khamzat Chimaev is banned from entering the United States, and they're working on it. And they think they can get a resolution. They think they can figure it out. And it's going to be crazy if they can't figure it out. Because how do you put Khamzat Chimaev in a title fight? I know necessarily he doesn't deserve one right now, but they're looking at putting him against Leon Edwards for the welterweight title. How do they put him in a title fight if he can't fight in Las Vegas? If he can't come to the United States where they hold the majority of their cards? Because if he wins the belt, that's so weird that now you have a champion that can only fight in Abu Dhabi. It would be really damning for whatever title he would potentially win, the welterweight title or the middleweight title, which supposedly the UFC is willing to give him either one of those. They said, the winner of the Kamaru Usman-Khamzat Chimaev fight's getting a title shot. And then there was talk of, obviously, Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev for UFC 300. Well, yesterday, Khamzat Chimaev did an interview where he was asked about UFC 300, and he was also asked about when's he going to fight next. And I think his answer is another breadcrumb that you can follow in and lead you to believe, okay, looks like Khamzat Chimaev is not coming to the United States anytime soon. They're hoping maybe for these issues going on with Khamzat to die down, and then they can figure them out and never have to acknowledge them publicly. Let's take a look at this short clip from the Khamzat Chimaev interview, which I'll also link down in the description.
In the summer, I think in the summer we'll be back. So I want to fight in Saudi Arabia, but so I don't think so anyone wants to fight me there. So we'll see what's gonna happen. So just waiting for something. And they wanted me to fight 300, but I said it's too short time for 77 kilos, so I need a little bit of time.
That's true. They asked you to fight Leon Edwards?
It wasn't 100% sure, but they talked, my manager said maybe, that's all. I said, my brother said to me, not in Ramadan. So after Ramadan, we take some time, camp, and then we fight anyone.
So there you hear Khamzat Chimaev say, I want to fight in the summer in Saudi Arabia. I mean, if that doesn't tell you right there what he's looking at in the future, He's fighting in Saudi Arabia in the summer, and then he's probably thinking, I'm going to fight in Abu Dhabi in October. So that just further strengthens the claim that Khamzat Chimaev is most likely unable to enter the United States. And he says, oh, I don't think anyone wants to fight me in Saudi Arabia. There is a chance he could fight in the UK because we've seen him show up in the audience. I don't remember the exact time frame, but he was there for a PFL card or a Bellator card, maybe like 6 months, a year ago, but things could have changed since then. But maybe he can fight in the UK, so that would give him a little bit more freedom. But he immediately says, I want to fight in the summer in Saudi Arabia. And the UFC has talked about the Saudi Arabia card and said, look, we don't want this just to be a normal card. This card literally got canceled and rescheduled because it wasn't good enough. The original Saudi Arabia card was March 2nd. And then also Khamzat says, he talks about UFC 300, and he says, look, it was too short of a time to make, 77 kilos. I believe there is also a chance that maybe Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev wasn't the number one option, and they kind of pivoted down the list of options. And they say, look, you want to take this fight? And maybe this kind of supports the narrative a little bit. Maybe he isn't banned. You want to take this fight? But Khamzat Chimaev, because he's gotten so big fighting in middleweight, he's not been cutting weight for the last, 2 years. Maybe, just maybe, he's thinking, well, I need more time to kind of get some of this weight off. Otherwise, I'm going to absolutely have an atrocious weight cut for UFC 300. And honestly, imagine Khamzat Chimaev takes the fight at UFC 300. He can get in the United States, and imagine he misses weight. What an utter calamity that would be. So I just really, truly believe, even though the reporting has been disingenuous, not offering any real evidence, and I've scoured the internet, I've looked at different government lists of people who are denied entry or banned entry in the United States. I've scoured long and hard, pause. And when I've been researching this, I've just had one dude on my mind, and that's Khamzat Chimaev. I have not been able to find any legitimate, credible evidence other than the bits and pieces that I've kind of compiled in this video showing you that it's most likely true, but we don't have the truly confirmed answer. I think the UFC is trying to wait this out in hoping that it gets resolved, and then they can just book Khamzat Chimaev and never acknowledge it. But it seems as of right now, Khamzat Chimaev will most likely fight in Saudi Arabia. If he doesn't fight in Saudi Arabia, maybe a UK summer card. If he doesn't fight there, then, okay, once a year again in Abu Dhabi. That's all we're getting from Khamzat Chimaev. So we'll see how it plays out. As we get more information, I'll do more videos regarding this topic. Hopefully we get some clarification soon. I want to see Khamzat Chimaev back in the cage. But just a quick prediction on that UFC Saudi Arabia main event. Maybe Sean Strickland versus Khamzat Chimaev. UFC Saudi Arabia Fight Night main event. Sean Strickland, he's shown anytime, anywhere. He'll beat up streamers if he wants and then cry on podcast about, different trash talk. But he's showing if you pay him the right amount of money, he'll go and fight anyone, anywhere. Khamzat Chimaev has kind of wanted that fight. Sean Strickland's a former champion, just lost his belt to DDP. So that kind of could align. And then hopefully they can figure out his visa issues after that. But we'll see what happens. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.